from the 30,000 foot view, we are a host. That is our role. And what that means is we are saying, welcome to this house, right? Like, welcome to the house of the Lord. You get to journey with people and say, come on with me, come along. This is where we're going. This is how we're going to get there, right? It gives us foundation to be able to have conversations with somebody about that. Hey, I'm Andrea Olson. I've been leading worship and training worship leaders for nearly 20 years, and my mission is to support worship leaders just like you in volunteer-supported ministries because I know what it's like. I've been there. It's amazing, but you have a big job, and sometimes you might feel a little bit alone. But I'm here to remind you that you aren't. We'll cover spiritual and leadership growth, practical resources, and get encouragement from other worship leaders from all over the world. I truly want to see you lead from the overflow, not the overwhelm. So grab a cup of tea or coffee and join me. Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. Well, I am so glad that you chose to listen in to the Overflow Worship Podcast today. It has been a while since I have done one of these by myself. We have had so many amazing guests throughout the last several months. And so if you are new here, welcome. Make sure that you go back and catch up a little bit. Listen to some of the conversations that I've had with some amazing worship leaders from all over the place. And I just love hearing their perspective and their experience. And I really believe that we can learn so much from one another. And that's why I bring people on the podcast, because I prayerfully consider every guest that we bring on, and I want it to be somebody who can really add value to you as our listeners. And so if there is somebody that you think would be a great guest for the podcast, or you would just really love to hear from, I would actually love to know that. So would you shoot us an email, info@overflowworship.com, and just tell us like, hey, I heard this person on a podcast. I think they'd be a great guest, or I would love to hear from this person. Just let us know and we'll consider that. So today I wanted to talk about having difficult conversations as worship leaders. And it's kind of something that a lot of us, at least I know I feel this way, and I talk to other people who do as well. We don't really like it. We don't really want to do it, right? And it's not that we won't, but it's just not fun. Now, I do know that there are some people who just do it with such grace and are so much better at it. And honestly, that comes with time and experience. So if you are a new or newly positioned worship leader and you're feeling overwhelmed by, how do I integrate myself into this new team and maybe a team that is existing, a team that has been there for a while? How do I gracefully step in, right? And how do I move forward and, help us progress or have some of these difficult conversations without causing a big mess, right? And so I wanted to talk about this today because I was actually at a conference this last week, and I was doing keynote and breakout sessions and leading worship. And a worship leader who was an attendee pulled me aside and said, hey, I would love to get your input on how to have a difficult conversation with a team member. And so in this case, she was a new worship leader to this church, right? And so what the difficulty there is you're dealing with a culture that is already established, right? The team members are probably not new. And so they've been doing this for a long time. And so this new person comes in and, sees some of the challenges, issues, struggles, you fill in the blank, and they have to address them, but it's intimidating because those people have been there for a long time, and you want to make sure that you go about it in the right way. So how do we do this? How do we have difficult conversations? Are you ready? Let's dive in. So the first step, the number one thing that I always talk about in regards to difficult conversations is relationship equity. Okay, so if you're brand new to this church, you want to be mindful about making changes really quickly. I always talk about how this is a slow turn of the dial. This is not a switch that you just flip on or turn off, making all the changes all at once. Okay. I remember years ago, I was working with an intern and he was very excited, very passionate college student, really wanting to learn all the things he could possibly learn. And so we had an internship program at the time. And so he applied and came in and did a short stint with us at Overflow Worship. And it was interesting to converse because in his passion, he said, I can see all of the issues and all of the problems and all of the things that I feel like I could speak to this, I could help with this. And so I just want to come in and fix all the problems. And from his perspective and from the place that his heart was in, it was so genuine and so pure. But from a standpoint of those on the receiving end, that is a little bit difficult. It could be offensive or it could be just confusing. Like, well, I didn't know that we had any problems, or we don't even know you. How do we know that these changes you're implementing are going to be helpful, are going to be necessary and actually move us towards growth and progress or move us towards our goals, right? And so it's important for us that as worship leaders that we even if we've been there for a while, but specifically in this case, especially when you're new, to be mindful of how you implement changes, okay? Because you don't have that relationship equity quite yet with the leadership or the team. And so when you're thinking through the lens of difficult conversations, in an ideal scenario, now I realize that this is not always the case, right? You cannot always have your ideal scenario. So I get that. And I just want you to hear me say that. But in an ideal one, what you want to do is, first of all, establish a relationship with that person, right? Like, how can you love that person where they are? How can you get to know them? Because what happens when we do that is we may actually find that there is a deeper reason why we're having this issue. Like, let's say the issue is they're just always showing up late to practice. They're never prepared and causing, issues in rehearsal because they're, combative or constantly interrupting and, that kind of thing. So let's say that's your difficulty. And so it does need to be addressed, right? It's not about like, you will be silent and you don't speak and unless spoken to. It's none of that. It's more just like, how can we honor the team, right? Like, how can we honor the team and move through rehearsals in a way that honors everybody? Well, maybe if you're focusing on relationship first and you get to know this person, you realize that this person is, in a super difficult spot in their job. It is so stressful. They're about to lose their job. And, home life is stressful and they don't have any extra time to prepare. And that also stresses them out. And so they come to rehearsal nervous and filled with anxiety because they feel bad that they are letting the team down. And it comes off as combative, or it comes off as, disorganized or disrespectful or whatever. So when we approach the person from a standpoint of relationship and we say, hey, I see you as a person, right? Like, we want them to know that we value them as a person, not just for what they can do for us, right? This is not about like, oh, I just need you for your gift. No, I value you as a person, right? And so it's important for us to establish that relationship with the person first. Now, this takes time, of course. And if it's a huge issue, and it needs to be addressed right now because it is going to be a massive impact on the ministry, then you got to do what you got to do, right? But at all costs, just view this through the lens of longevity and through the future. And like, even if you're not having difficulty right now with anybody, how can you set yourself up for success in the future? Establish relationship with people, because it is so much easier to have those conversations when they trust you as a person who genuinely cares about them. And they maybe will feel less defensive when that conversation comes. Okay. So that's number one, relationship. Approach it through the lens of relationship. Okay. Number two, the second thing to think about when you're approaching a difficult conversation with a team member is understanding the why behind the what. Okay, what do I mean by that? So let's look at this through the lens of this same situation, right? So we've got this team member and they're having difficulties at home and at work and they're stressed and it's coming out in rehearsal and it's frustrating for everybody. Well, does this person understand the why behind the what? The what being rehearsal being smooth, right? And so having that conversation and saying, hey, I appreciate you and I appreciate all that you're doing. And I see you in this struggle in this time in your life. How can we work together to move through rehearsal in a way that honors everybody? Because, right, here's the why. The what's rehearsal. And because we got to do it for Sunday, right? The why is because number one, we want to honor our team members. We want to honor one another. And we want to make sure that we have time to pray and worship together at the end, because that is what fuels us. Before we go on our way, we want to worship and pray and read scripture together. And also because if we as a team don't feel prepared for Sunday because rehearsal went super long and we didn't get through everything, or, you fill in the blank, well, then we feel anxious moving into Sunday, and we may potentially be a distraction to the people on Sunday, right? Now, I know there's all the factors. So this is not something that is going to go perfect every time, and that, it's not like we'll never face these challenges and struggles, right? But it's important that we understand the why behind the what, and the person that you're talking to understands the why behind the what, but the why behind the conversation, right? Because I think sometimes in emotion, we get combative and it's like, well, I'm doing the best I can, right? Like I'm doing the best that I can. I have a full-time job and I have a family, and, we kind of start to justify and fill in those blanks in our minds. And it's like, no. Like, that's not where I'm coming from. That's not why I'm talking to you. It's not because like, well, the rule is you come to rehearsal prepared and that's just the rule. And that's kind of how my brain works a little bit. And so I really have to check myself and be like, no. We're not just making up rules because it's fun and because like, well, I'm the leader, I get to call the shots. No, it's not that at all. And I know that as worship leaders, that's not where your heart is, right? And so it's important for us though to verbalize that, because it could come off that way. So let's just address the elephant in the room. Like, what's the why behind the what? As a side note, oh my goodness, this week, so I'm a homeschool mom, and one of my girls said, because we got this little set of wooden elephants that we have sitting on a shelf in our schoolroom because my husband brought them back from Africa. And so we've been studying about Africa, and it's like a visual for us, and they're beautiful hand-carved wooden elephants. And one of my girls said, oh, shall we address the elephant in the room? And everybody laughed. And then she goes, what does that mean anyway? And it was just really cute. So we talked about that this week in school. We learned what that meant. But anyways, so the why behind the what, sometimes we have to really address that elephant in the room and say, no, this is why I'm coming at this. It's not because, this is just what we do and we're going for perfection. It's holistically like, I just want to see this team thrive and do well, and I need your help with this. Okay. So that's number 2. We are going to take a quick pause from today's episode because I have a free gift for you. Leading worship is a big deal. And as much as the responsibility thrills you, it also can be a little daunting, right? And I know because I've been there. As someone who's led worship for more than 20 years, I know how stressful prepping for the weekend set can be, because let's face it, Sunday's always coming. So I've developed a checklist that I go through every single time I'm preparing a set list for an upcoming service, and it really helps a lot. I feel confident, I feel prepared. It saves me time because let's face it, volunteer, you're probably spending precious evening time working because you're just trying to fit it all in. And so this helps you work smart and saves you time. And most importantly, it just helps me make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. It's helped me for 20 years and I'm giving it to you for free. So click the link in the show notes or head on over to overflowworship.com/setlist-checklist to get yours today. All right, back to today's episode. Number 3, asking yourself, does this person understand their role on the worship team? Does your whole team understand their role as a worship team? So I truly believe that as a worship team, obviously, our number one goal is pointing people to Jesus, right? Like, hands down, that's what we do. Honestly, sometimes I think we lose sight of that, not because we're awful people, like you're wonderful people. It's because we're busy and we've got so many plates to keep spinning on a Sunday morning. But in our hearts, we know that is the number one goal. But as we think through the lens of our role on the worship team, well, not in the micro, like the guitar, the instrument, the vocal. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I mean, from the 30,000 foot view, we are a host. That is our role. I truly believe that we are a host. And what that means is we are saying, everybody, welcome to this house, right? Like, welcome to the house of the Lord. And you get to journey with people and say, come on with me, come along. This is where we're going. This is how we're going to get there, right? We're hosting them. And when we view it through that lens, it gives us a ground or like a foundation to be able to have conversations with somebody about that. So back to this lens of this difficult conversation we maybe have to have with someone about not showing up prepared to rehearsal, the same situation. Okay, well, in this conversation, we can sit down and we can say, okay, here's the thing. If we view this through the lens of hosting, and every Sunday we are a host and we want to do absolutely everything that we can to preserve the atmosphere of worship in this house and to steward it with integrity and to lead people into this holy place and then get out of the way so that they're not distracted by us. That is why. If that's our role, that's why we have to come prepared. And that gives you grounds for the conversation. And from there, ask them, please, what can I do to help you? Like, I know that you're a volunteer and you've got all of these life circumstances that you're facing. How can I help you? And so worship leaders, when you are having this conversation, it's important to then also say, like, what can I do? What can I do to help you? Do you need resources? Do you need tools? Would it be helpful if I met with you sometime where I know, maybe you have extra time somewhere on a different day and I went through things with you or whatever. You brainstorm with them, because even if they don't take you up on it, I mean, you got to mean it. You got to mean it. Make sure you're willing to follow through on it. But even if they don't take you up on it, it really shows that you care and you're investing in that relationship. So all of these things play off of one another. So make sure that you are approaching it from a standpoint of relationship, and make sure that you are investing in the relationship. Make sure that you both understand the why behind the what that you're addressing, right? It's maybe not as harsh as it seems. And so you need to come at it from that standpoint, and then understanding the role of the worship team. And that's going to help you really ground and anchor that conversation. And then the last thing I would say is you do have to be direct, right? And as you're having this conversation, being direct, not elusive, because not everybody struggles with this, but me personally, I do. I will get elusive or generalized, especially when I'm in the moment, because I start to feel like, oh, I don't really want to do this, or I don't want to make them feel bad, or I don't want to come off wrong. And so then I pull back and I generalize, or I get elusive, and they may walk away more confused. Like, I don't even know what that was about. They just told me they loved me and they appreciate me and we need to host and be mindful, and I don't know why they said that, right? No, you do need to be direct and make sure that in the conversation, you are directly addressing in love, hey, this is the issue that we're facing and it's causing this, and I want to work with you to find a solution, and this is why, right? This is our role, and I care about you and I want you to stay on the team, right? And I do think that in certain situations, it's important to also give that person an out. And that doesn't mean, that you're kicking them off the team or anything like that, but saying, hey, given, and speaking from this specific scenario, there's so many different ones, but I'm just using this as an example. Given your current life circumstance, do you want to be removed from the schedule for a while? Right? That doesn't mean you like delete them from planning center and you're like, well, you'll have to start over, right? No, it's like, hey, would that be helpful for you? We love you, we value you, we want you on the team, but would that be helpful? And making sure that they know that this isn't a mandatory thing. In this case, sometimes it will be, right? And that's where the direct aspect comes in. That's where, not beating around the bush is super important. But I would encourage you to think about that. Maybe that's a piece of the conversation that you want to add in to say, hey, would you like to be removed from the schedule for a little bit, just to let you catch your breath? We would love to give that to you, right? And in the case where, I will just say, in the case where it's a different scenario, right? There is some lifestyle choices or situations that, you can fill in the blank with whatever would apply to your context that would lead to someone being asked to step down off the worship team. That is a very difficult conversation, right? And all of these same steps apply. Like if you don't have relationship with that person, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard either way, but it's going to be even harder. And you need to make sure that they understand the why behind the what, and that you do too. And they need to understand how the role of the worship team plays into this. Like, why is this an issue, right? And why are we coming at this conversation and saying, hey, it's time for you to step down because of this? And in that regard, with this difficult conversation that results in, them having to exit the worship team, I would say make sure to get your leadership involved, whatever that looks like within your church structure, whoever that is, senior pastor, elder board, whatever. Talk to them about it. And, don't go about it alone. If you want the pastor in it with you or whatever the case may be, do that so that you approach it from a unified team standpoint, and it's not like a shock to everybody on the elder board or the staff or whatever. Like, keep in communication about it and ask their thoughts. Like, what should I do? Get outside input from them in a safe, confidential space so that you feel like you're moving forward with their backing, with their support. Okay. So those are my kind of top tips when I have conversation about this. How do we have difficult talks with our teams? How do we do that? And these are just a few things that work as a filter. It really gives you grounds and anchors the conversation, and then you can build it from there, right? But these are the foundations. So I am just really glad that you showed up today. And that is it for this episode of the Overflow Worship Podcast. So I hope that you took some notes, or if you're driving, come back, scrub through, take some notes so that you can remember these foundations and put them in place and work towards them, right? Maybe you're not in it right now, but you're like, I'm going to work towards this, invest in relationship, and put a process in place so that I can pull it out and print it out and look at it and follow it when the time comes. Thank you so much for listening today. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, will you please hit subscribe so you never miss another one? Whatever platform you listen on, just hit subscribe. And you know what? I really do want to know what you love about the podcast. So would you please head over to Apple Podcasts and scroll down to the bottom and leave us a review? We really do read them all, and we love hearing your feedback and what you love about it so that we can continue to create relevant, helpful content. And honestly, the reviews are the only way for us to work with the algorithm to reach more people. So if you want to help us reach more people, that's the way to do it. We would really, really appreciate that. And don't forget, we do have a free gift for you. It's my plan for creating a great set list every single time while streamlining and working smart. And you can get it totally free. Just visit overflowworship.com/setlist-checklist. That is all for today. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, keep on thriving.